Hello everyone, my name is Owen, and today I'll be doing a quick review of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. What I want to do is give a brief overview of what the book is about and tell you the things that I liked and tell you the things that I did not like. Before we get started, this is the Barnes & Noble leatherbound edition. As you can see, it is very pretty. It's got some art on the back. Gold pages, it's pretty cool. It made me feel very sophisticated reading it. That's not part of the review, but if you want to feel like, oh, I'm very smart, get an edition like this. They're actually pretty cheap for what they are. So yeah, get them at Barnes & Nobles if you're interested. But anyway, overview. This is a story of revenge. The main character, Edmond Dantes, is horribly betrayed and imprisoned for a very long time. And the story, it starts with obviously like what's going on. And then the second half is how he gets his revenge. This is a classic. It was written in 1844, I believe, so like 170-ish years ago. So yeah, it is a classic novel. Many movies and series have been either direct adaptations or heavily inspired by this story. I had not read it, obviously, but I heard good things, so I wanted to pick it up. And going into things that I liked, I thought this was a very, 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 very solidly written classic. And you're gonna be like, oh, well, classics are solidly written, that's why they're classic. Yeah, you're probably right, actually. But this is my favorite classic I've ever read. How about that? I bet you weren't expecting that one. It is very long. This edition is about 1,000 pages. I know there's a abridged version, but if you want my personal opinion, you should never read abridged versions of books, because then you're not reading the book, you're reading someone's version of Spark Notes for the book, which is kind of lame. But I'm going to jump into things that I didn't like. The only things that I didn't like is that it is written like an old book, in the sense that it is very wordy, it's very verbose and very descriptive, very like tangential. It goes off on a lot of tangents and stuff like that. And it was distracting for me at some times, where obviously the plot is this man getting his revenge, but it would go off in seemingly unrelated directions, about backgrounds on different things they needed to know about, or like character introductions and their entire backstories when they didn't feel relevant to me at the time. However, I will say, going back to things that I liked, that I was a fool for ever doubting this story. Every word that the author uses in this book is relevant. I'll just say that. So even though you're on page 400 and you're introduced to a character that you don't really care about, it's because it's relevant. And honestly, the final act of this book is one of the best final acts that I've ever read in any book, classic or not. It all comes together in such a beautiful way that, I don't know. I can't say anything without spoiling it. But even though this has been in pop culture for so long, for like the entirety of the last 5 generations of life, I did not know that much about the story and how it was going to play out. I assumed that it would be a classic like action movie revenge story, and I guess kind of spoilers if you were thinking that too, but it's not. It's so much better, it's so much more clever, and it's so much deeper than you thought. The message at the end and how it ends is not what you think. Even for what I described, I guarantee you're thinking, oh, it probably ends this way. Yeah, you're probably like 3/4 right, but the quarter that you weren't right, it's deep, man. It makes you think about life, right? And I really, really like that. So yeah, if you have trouble with classics, this is definitely a slow read. It's just like the characters talk in monologues. They don't say single sentences very often. They say entire page paragraphs. And you know what? By the end of the book, I couldn't even notice that I was reading a 150-year-old writing style. It just felt, the suspense and the tension was all there so obviously that like you just forget that you're reading like old-timey language, like you just become immersed in that world. And that's one of the things I loved about this book, is because it's so long and because they go into so much detail about different things and different characters, you are in this world and all the politics and the drama. Like you are in there and you fully understand where everybody is and how they feel about this thing and everything. And it feels like it would be boring and maybe too much but the way that it's laid out, it's just so good. And another thing about like classics and like them being verbose, this is kind of like a side comment. I had a professor who said that it's interesting reading old books is because that was their source of information at the time. Like you didn't have the internet to like look up like, oh, like how does sailing work? So like in books like this, who the main character is a sailor, the author would do his research, like in libraries and reading stuff, blah, 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 and then write it into the book. That way, when you're reading the Count of Monte Cristo, you're like, oh, well, I know a little bit more about sailing now, which is actually kind of a new perspective. And I felt like when I was reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that was a lot more like, okay, you're trying to explain to me how like fish look like and like how submarines work, or I guess or how they would work because they weren't invented yet. Weird. But this one, I didn't really feel that as much. Like there definitely is like tangents and rants, but it all felt very present. Like it didn't feel like the author was trying to teach me something. So I guess what I just said was irrelevant, but it's just something interesting to think about when reading classics in general. But like I said, even though you may feel like, oh, it's not getting to the point quick enough, it's because it's setting up the real point, and it's just so good. So yeah, the only thing I didn't like was that in the beginning and middle, I just didn't understand how good it was. So how about that? Definitely recommend it. If you like classics and you haven't read it, you're gonna love it. If you don't like classics, I encourage you to try this one. While it is long and it is a behemoth to try to tackle, classics are a whole nother world out there, guys. And I highly recommend this fantastic story. Thank you so much.